Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for being here. Let's get right to the business at hand and move directly to item number 2 on our open meetings agenda, which is the approval of the minutes from our February 28, 2012 public session. The minutes were in your board book, which were distributed earlier in the week, and they are behind tab A. I assume everyone has had an opportunity to review them. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion regarding the minutes? All in favor of adopting the minutes?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion to adopt the minutes is carried. We'll move right to our executive director report. Ellen?
Thank you very much, Chair and members of the Commission. We are releasing today the 2011 annual report. And this report summarizes data from the past year as well as certain work performed by the prior Commission on Public Integrity in 2011, and it highlights certain changes brought about by the Public Integrity Reform Act of 2011. I'm going to now give you a brief overview of the report, but the report appears in its full form on our website, which is jcope.ny.gov, and commissioners have also been provided a hard copy of it. The report gives, as by way of introduction, an overview, as you know, of the Public Integrity Reform Act, which was signed into law on August 15th of 2011, and established this new independent Joint Commission on Public Ethics, which expanded the existing functions and jurisdiction of the former Commission on Public Integrity. PURA expands the oversight of the Commission to include both the executive and legislative branches of state government, and increases disclosure requirements in financial disclosure reporting and lobbying activity. The Joint Commission on Public Ethics continued the lobbying and ethics oversight functions of the predecessor agencies, but has broader regulatory authority and oversight to include state legislators, candidates for the legislature, and legislative employees, as well as the 4 statewide elected officials, candidates for those offices, executive branch state employees, certain political party chairs, and lobbyists and their clients. Under the Reform Act of 2011, there is also expanded disclosure and reporting requirements for those that are within the Commission's jurisdiction. And of course, the Commission has 14 members who meet at a minimum bi-monthly, and those Commission members are appointed by the Governor and legislative leadership. The report does a brief overview of the ethics oversight from 2011. The Commission's ethics oversight includes administration of the Financial Disclosure Statement Program, ethics training, and enforcement of ethics laws under the Public Officers Law, the Executive Law, and the Civil Service Law. In the calendar year of 2011, over 25,000 individual financial disclosure statements were filed. We anticipate that'll be a higher number this year. And effective for 2012, under PURA, financial disclosure statements will be required for legislators, candidates for those offices, and legislative staff, and those will be filed with the Commission. In 2011, the former Commission on Public Integrity opened 134 investigations of alleged ethics and lobbying violations and issued what were called 19 what were called notices of reasonable cause. That was the instrument used under the prior statute, and they were referred to as NORCs. NORCs can be resolved by settlement or by imposition of a civil penalty following an adjudicatory hearing, and in 2011, there were 11 such final dispositions. Under the new law, the enforcement authority has been expanded, authorizing the Commission to impose civil penalties and, where appropriate, to refer for criminal prosecution certain violations of the Public Officers Law, and we now no longer proceed under the NORC. For advisory opinions in 2011, The former commission issued 97 informal opinions and 3 formal advisory opinions. The full opinions can be found on our website at jcope.ny.gov, but it happened to be that each of these opinions clarified an issue relating to post-employment restrictions under Public Officers Law, Section 73. Training and educational services are obviously a key function of the prior agency and of our new commission. On January 2nd, 2011, Governor Cuomo signed Executive Order Number 3, and that required mandatory ethics training every 2 years for all executive chamber staff and top-level state officials. In 2011, this training was provided to almost 6,000 state employees, in addition to other training. As we've discussed previously, training and education is a priority for JCOPE, and there will be new emphasis on all kinds of training, particularly with a new emphasis on online training programs, so that we can make sure that training and education is as accessible and available as possible to all within our jurisdiction. So obviously another core function of this agency is oversight of lobbyists and their clients. During the lobbying year ending December 31st, 2011, there were over 6,000 lobbyists registered who filed reports with the agency, representing over 3,500 clients. In 2011, over 45,000 filings and lobbying contracts were reviewed by the agency. And in that calendar year, a record $220 million was spent on lobbying, which represents an increase from the year before of approximately $7 million. And this increase represents more than 175% increase in overall spending as compared to 10 years ago. And some of this is reflected in, the report has a number of charts summarizing this data, but I'm going to highlight for you just a few of them. This is what I've mentioned, just a depiction of the increase in lobbying spending. As you see, a consistent trend in the increase in lobbying spending. The record from in this year of 2011 of $220 million, but it shows a consistent trend upwards. It appears that lobbying is recession-proof.
It defies gravity.
This next chart depicts lobbyists ranked, top 10 lobbyists ranked by total compensation and reimbursed expenses for 2011. Remember, all of this is based on data that is reported to us. These figures are based on the 2011 lobbyist bi-monthly reports as they existed in our data as of February 28th of 2012. And based on that, these are the top 10 lobbyists reflecting the compensation and reimbursed expenses. They are fairly consistent with the top 10 from the year before, and the numbers are very consistent with the year before. The next chart depicts clients ranked by the total lobbying expenditures reported for 2011. And this is based on the compensation and expense figures reported in the client semi-annual reports. Again, it's the semi-annual reports for 2011 as they existed as of February 28th, 2012. You can see that the top ranked is the Committee to Save New York, and interestingly, almost $12 million is reported in lobbying expenditures. A vast majority of that money was spent for advertising. and that's similar to the year before, where the top spending was by the American Beverage Association, which reported spending of approximately $12.9 million. Again, most of that was for advertising in the year before. And also, interestingly, the American Beverage Association dropped off altogether from this top 10 with a reported spending of about $400,000 this year. I just mentioned advertising, so I thought it would be interesting to highlight the advertising spending, which this is based on advertising expenses that are reported in the client semi-annual reports for these various years. It's interesting, the trending is different than the trending that you see on the lobbying spending overall, but it does still show upward trends and a record spending on advertising in 2011. As I mentioned, interestingly, in both 2010 and 2011, almost half of the total ad spending was by a single entity. As I said, last year, in 2011, it was the Committee to Safety New York, but in 2010, it was the American Beverage Association. This is a comparison of lobbying money spent by business nature. This is a category that is reported on the filings, and it should be clear that this is not the total spending by each of these industries, but this is what lobbyists reported as categories when they reported their compensation and reimbursed expenses. This does not include industry expenses such as industry advertising. So this is just what's reported by the lobbyists. Again, interestingly, the numbers are, notwithstanding the fact that this was a record year in lobbying spending, the numbers are really very consistent between 2010 and 2011, including the breakdown by category. And that's it. So as I said, the full report and all of the charts are included in the full report, which is online at jcope.ny.gov.
Thank you, Ellen. The administrative update.
Thank you.
Catch your breath for a moment.
Thank you. So I have a few matters to report on for the administrative update. I'm pleased to report that we continue to make we make very real progress regarding JCOPE's office space, which has been an issue of some discussion before the Commission. We've been working with OGS and now have a plan which includes consolidation of our third floor space to our second floor space. We would retain the first and the second floor, and we would consolidate all personnel largely to the second floor, and would leave us ample space for some additional growth as well. This will result in significant savings in our annual lease payments, and we are confident that those savings will cover costs of a downstate and Western New York office, which we think is the appropriate next steps. With respect to another area of priority is hiring. We've talked about the importance of building staff, and we obviously need to build staff. I'm delighted to announce that we have hired Monica Stamm, who joins us as Chief of Staff and Deputy Counsel. She's already been a terrific asset, and we really look forward to working with her. We continue to receive resumes, and we have received hundreds of resumes for various open positions. We've been conducting interviews. Most recently, we've conducted about 20 interviews, and from that, we've extended offers to an investigator and an attorney, and we are actively continuing the recruiting process and hope to have additional staff on board in the next few weeks. I'd like to turn to the fiscal report. Our fiscal year 2011-2012 spending as of Friday, March 23rd. The commission has dispersed $3.2 million of its cash ceiling of $3.4 million, and that's our spending. With respect to revenues, as of Friday, March 23rd, the commission has deposited revenues of $593,594 into the state general fund. Again, these are revenues that reflect lobbyist registration fees, client filing fees, late filing fees, and fines. Those are the source of the revenue, and of course, we don't get these funds. These are funds that go, that's revenue that goes to the state general fund. I can also update on the status of the new computers, which you've been hearing about. There has been progress. We received the approval from the Division of Budget, and we've placed that order. We've actually received some portions of the order, so that is well underway.
Any questions for Ellen regarding either the annual report, the hiring update, or the fiscal update?
Madam Chair.
Yes.
As you know, we have had a conference call with Ellen, Mitra, and Pat. We continued, as we were asked to do, to look at the structure, to continue to review it. We did discuss with Ellen the fact that it's in a very unusual structure, in that all the lawyers are reporting to the executive director. The general counsel does not appear under this structure. Now, Ms. Vibes is a lawyer, so there's not an issue in that sense. But I'm just not sure how a general counsel's office works if it doesn't have lawyers. And this is, I don't know if it's unprecedented. I've been searching around trying to find a similar model at this point. I've been unable to do that. Doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, but I've had a lot of trouble just finding it. I haven't found any, at least in New York State government. But in doing this led me to something else. Chapter 510 of the laws of 1999, which is the successor to 814 of 87, which is the
Recite that, please.
510 of the laws of 1999. It's the New York State Governmental Accountability, Audit, and Internal Control Act. And I believe there's separate sections of it. Applies to state government, state agencies, the legislature, and the judiciary. One of the things for state agencies is I believe we need an internal control person. And I did not find, in going through the information, that we have an internal control person. So I'm not sure how we're exactly complying with it at the moment.
So what is your suggestion?
My suggestion is, I have two suggestions. The first is that we take a good hard look at the reporting functions of lawyers in the agency. I think it's, and this is not anything against the executive director. It's just an effective checks and balance to have an effective counsel's office. And the second thing I would ask is that Ellen go back and work with staff to put an internal control person in, because we collect money, and we also have to take a look at the other functions that we perform, and that's what an internal control person does.
Anyone?
Should I respond quickly?
Sure.
As you know, the proposed the staffing plan, which was approved, is predicated on the structure. So the structure has already been approved. It's true, as it exists, the general counsel doesn't have any direct reports, but that's not true that there's not counsel. There's obviously counsel throughout the agency. They're just separated by core functions, and we believe that the way they're separated makes the best use of them, reporting directly up to the executive director, and the commission obviously ratified that by voting to approve it. The internal control officer is not a staffing position, so that's not something that would be identified in the staffing plan. But there is, in fact, of course, an internal control officer and internal controls in place. It has been Janine Clemente. It has been,
For Commission on Public Integrity, it was Carol Mirabelli. It reverted to me after Carol moved on to...
right, it is currently Janine Clemente, and we will operate with her as the internal control officer until we decide to make those changes. But the agency has previously complied with internal controls and will continue to do so.
Now, I understand there's a considerable number of internal controls here. I just couldn't find one in a box that said this is the person, because, again, most state agencies, when they're setting up an organizational chart, will designate, we may be too small to designate one person to do only that function. But the person who's designated has to be in a position so they're not, for example, not dealing with money. They got to be somewhat away from the day-to-day operations of the agency in order to ensure that it's an effective function.
Well, we'll review that, and we'll ensure, if we're not comfortable with the existing procedures, that's certainly something that we will review and make changes to, and certainly, I'm sure we'll have the help and guidance of the Administration Committee in doing that.
Great.
It's a benefit of having the wealth of information and knowledge that Commissioner
Old age.
Wiseman brings to the table. But really, you've done a tremendous job, Ellen, in putting this together as quickly as you have, and I'm sure you'll incorporate Commissioner Wiseman's concerns.
There was another concern raised at and it was just briefly discussed, and that had to do with recusal policy for staff. As we're hiring people, we're hiring them from various places. Some of them are coming from other state entities. And it just seemed, at least to me, that in the event we have hired someone who worked on a matter that subsequently comes to this commission to work, that just to avoid issues of appearance, it would make sense to have them recuse themselves.
As a blanket rule?
Yes. If the fact specific is, did you work on the matter someplace else so it landed here? I mean, we're supposed to be an independent body.
But wouldn't that automatically be covered by the lifetime bar?
No. That's state to, we're talking about state employee to a new state entity,
Oh, I see. It's not, they haven't exited the state government.
And it's not a true conflict. It's absolutely not a true conflict. It's a question of appearance. I think it's something that we really have to consider.
But you're presupposing that a person that's now coming on staff of JCOB that previously was
Just
on that same topic somewhere else in state government?
that if they worked on a matter,
Okay.
that obviously if it's coming to JCOB, okay, there may be a reason it's coming to JCOB.
Never a healthy one.
So it might behoove us to look at a policy that effectively protects the staff and protects the commission from issues of appearance and preserves the independence that you've talked about consistently.
Yeah. Good sense.
Anyone else?
I think those cases would be treated on an ad hoc basis anyway, but the development of a protocol is something that staff can certainly work on, and I'm sure by the time of our next meeting, we would have something to consider, plug into our protocol of operations, and that will do it.
Okay. Your Honor, I just want to protect us. That's
Okay.
all I'm looking at.
Love it.
Very good. So that matter will be taken up between now and the next meeting, and the staff will report back on a proposed policy regarding that so that the commission can take that up and deliberate and vote on that.
Very nuance-rich issue.
Okay. Any other questions for Ellen? Okay, thank you, Ellen. Very nicely done. Let's move to Roman numeral 4. Can I have a motion to enter into executive session?
So moved.
Second?
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the motion is carried.
Okay.
Somebody got Joe.
Okay, we are back in the public session, the open meeting session of the Joint Commission on Public Ethics, and there are several matters that I would like to announce, public announcements of actions taken during the executive session. Number one, the Commission voted to adopt emergency adjudicatory regulations that will be appropriately filed promptly and will be also promptly posted on our website. The Commission also voted to rescind the prior regulations relating to records access and to adopt guidelines for records access, which will be followed by the Joint Commission on Public Ethics. Is there any new business? Okay, hearing no mention of new business, is there a motion to adjourn the public meeting?
So moved.
Second?
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you very much.